Okay, general consensus from the comments of the last video went something along the lines of, wow, Steven, great job on the video. Only problem is, what about all these assholes? Great question. You see, during the Crusades, Soul Bad Guy saves the life of a young boy named Cliff Anderson, which inspires Cliff to eventually join the Sacred Order of Holy Knights, later becoming the Order's leader because he's fucking jacked. Later on, both Kai Kisk and Soul Bad Guy join the Holy Order under Cliff's command. Shortly after joining, Soul decides to steal one of the Order's sacred weapons, known as the Fire Seal, but then Kai walks in and is like, hey, what the fuck, man? But then Cliff walks in and is like, nah, it's chill, I was gonna give it to him anyways. With this, Soul is forced to desert the Holy Order. But trust me, this is not the last we'll see of Holy Order Soul. This brings us to the end of the Crusades. Justice is sealed, the Holy Order disbands, and Cliff retires. Meanwhile, local British man living in the 20th century named Axel Lowe is literally just chilling out one day until he is inexplicably thrown 200 years into the future. Apparently people usually die when this happens, but Axel survives because, reasons. Axel doesn't exactly want to be in this new timeline since his beloved girlfriend Megumi is currently waiting for him back home, so he searches for a way to return to his original timeline. He nearly gives up until he stumbles upon a tournament that promises the winner to get anything they wish for. This tournament draws tons of interest from many different people, including Assassin's Guild leader Zato 1, who was arrested after his fellow assassin Melia Rage completely abandoned him during a high-risk mission. Zato is special because he actually performed a forbidden magic spell that gives him a funny little shadow friend named Eddie, but unfortunately, Eddie decides to take control over Zato's body mid-tournament, which eventually kills him. Rough. Another significant character in this tournament is Potemkin, who was born in an airborne country called Zep. You know, because those just exist now. Unfortunately, Zep engaged in copious amounts of corruption and forced Potemkin to live as a slave soldier until he was approached by Sergeant Gabriel, whom he joined forces with to lead a revolution to establish Zep as a democratic society. Next we have Dr. Baldhead, who had previously wound up in a malpractice incident where his patient, a young girl, passed away on the operating table, which turned him into a mad prolific serial killer. By the end of the tournament, Dr. Baldhead realizes, oh shit, I forgot, I'm a doctor. So he renames himself to Faust and actually tries to do his job properly this time. Also present at the tournament is Cliff Anderson, who finds out about Justice's revival, so he confronts the newly resurrected Justice and takes her on in battle. But unfortunately, he's old, and he dies. Eventually, Soul Bad Guy utterly destroys Justice, leading into the events of Guilty Gear Zex. The premise of this game revolves around a bounty worth the hefty sum of 500,000 world dollars to destroy the most powerful gear in existence, Dizzy, which fails because A, she's too powerful, and B, she's not even doing anything. In fact, she's actually a pretty nice fellow, but for some reason they award the bounty to Jam Karadabri, who didn't even fight Dizzy, by the way, and she uses the money to fund a restaurant, which burns down 2 weeks later. This whole game was just a net zero. Now we move on to the events of Guilty Gear X2 Sharp Reload, which is a game I completely forgot about last time and nobody noticed. And for good reason, because all that happens in this game is Ino nearly kills Soul Bad Guy, causing her to get punished by that man, and then that man tells Soul, oh boy, something bad's gonna happen in the next game. Woo! We now move on to Accent Core, which is not the next game in the franchise. It's actually the same game as X2 Sharp Reload, but with a continuation of the storyline. Here, Ino decides to make another attempt to kill Soul Bad Guy, because she believes it's what that man wants, even though she was just punished 20 seconds ago for doing exactly that. Her plan is very simple. Step 1, teleport Soul to whatever the hell this place is. Step 2, bring Holy Order Soul from the past into the present, and step 3, watch the two Soul Bad Guys kill each other. Ino lands the final blow on Order Soul with the ingenious plan of pulling some grandfather paradox bullshit on present Soul, but then Soul is just thrown back into the present, completely unharmed, talks to Kai for a bit. That's a little awkward. That man is just about done with Ino pulling this bullshit, so he brings along Anji Mito, a Japanese dude who's hanging with that man because he wants to know why that happened. Together, the two freeze Ino in time, preventing her from doing anything evil ever again. Anji is strolling around when he runs into a guy named Chip Zanoff. You see, Chip lived much of his life as if it were Breaking Bad, until some guy named Tsuyoshi got him clean, taught him the art of ninjutsu, all before getting murdered by the Assassin's Guild shortly thereafter. What a fucking sentence. Chip tries to get revenge on the Assassin's Guild for a while, but that never really did anything for him, so instead he decides to become the president. He goes around telling people to vote for him until Anji tells him, bro, what are you doing? Our country doesn't even hold elections! Meanwhile, Eddie realizes that Zato's decomposing, rotting corpse does not provide him with enough nutrients to continue using him as a host. I guess he didn't think that one through very well. Eddie looks for a new host, but he ends up dying in the process, leaving leadership of the Assassin's Guild to Zato's second in command, Venom. Also, many characters in in this game are investigating an organization known as the Post-War Administration Bureau. Now that storyline doesn't really matter at all, but they do create Robo-Kai and he becomes very important later. Speaking of later, this brings us to Guilty Gear Xrd Sign. Here we see Slayer, a sexy vampire DILF who was the original founder of the Assassin's Guild. He finds out that Zato 1 was actually resurrected from the dead by the Conclave as an experiment for potentially reviving justice. Slayer relays to Faust about Zato's resurrection, and also tells him that the malpractice incident responsible for his downfall was actually staged by the Conclave who hired Zato 1 to orchestrate the incident. This is because the operation that Faust was planning to perform that day held the secret to reviving the dead, which would have compromised the Conclave's plans irreparably. Soon after, Faust is approached by Johnny, the leader of the Jellyfish Pirates, who previously noticed that one of his crewmates, May, has been getting some strange headaches, so Faust gets to work in finding a cure. Johnny goes back to check up on May, but when he gets home, he realizes that she's gone missing. Where did she go? It turns out that May actually ran off to go fight Ramlethal Valentine. You know, the girl who declared war on all of humanity. Along the way, May runs into Chip, who's doing pretty well for himself now. He quite literally walked into a lawless part of South Africa and said, "Yup, this is mine now," and that's how the Eastern Chip Kingdom was born. After the two somehow defeat Ramlethal, they meet up with Johnny and Faust, and May finally starts receiving treatment. Meanwhile, Assassin's Guild members Melia, Slayer, and Venom are having a meetup regarding their crazy intel on the Conclave. The guild agrees that they should deliver the intel to Kai, so the assassins set off to go find him. But at that moment, the team gets ambushed by one of the most powerful characters in the entire franchise, Bedman. Bedman whoops all of their asses before teleporting everyone to the Jellyfish Pirates, where he quickly knocks out Faust for knowing too much. Bedman almost wins here, but then Zato shows up and he's forced to retreat. So Zato goes to Zep to relay his information to Kai, until Bedman starts tearing through Zep, but then Sergeant Gabriel shows up and he's forced to retreat. So Gabriel goes off to help destroy the cradle until Bedman shows up and starts ruining everything. But then Leo Whitefang and Johnny show up and he's forced to retreat. Skipping to after the destruction of the cradle, we now move on to Xrd Revelator, where Faust looks into May's illness and discovers that the disease actually just straight up turns Japanese people into gears that explode. So naturally, Faust is a bit hard-pressed into finding a cure. He, alongside Johnny and like a million other characters, all work towards protecting the Japanese, including Kum Hae-hyun, who despite their appearance is actually not a buff badass old man, but is actually a teenage girl inside of a mech suit of a buff badass old man. Just thought I'd mention that. Meanwhile, Ino is no longer frozen in time. I don't know why, they never explained it. Ino is chasing after Jacko when she runs into Axel, who is still trying to return to his original timeline and see his girlfriend Megumi again. The two of them work together to find Jacko, who then proceeds to give both of them a healthy dose of existentialism. Jacko explains that Ino was created during the Crusades as the result of humanity's collective hope for better days condensing into a single point in the backyard. Did you get all that? Great, we're moving on. Jacko then reveals to Axel that if he goes back to his original timeline, he'll quite literally erase the entire Guilty Gear world around him. So essentially, the guy who can destroy the entire world with a decision, and the man that the universal will fears the most, is the British guy wearing fucking jorts. Soon after, Jacko teleports back to base with a guy named Raven. There they talk about how there's another unfinished Jacko unit named, get this, Happy Chaos. Not to be confused with this guy, he was actually eavesdropping on their conversation the whole time and loved the name Happy Chaos so much that he just took it for himself. In other words, there's two Happy Chaoses. Have fun sleeping with that knowledge tonight. Now let's talk about Raven. He was actually a medieval German soldier who died but then became immortal for some reason. So he tried using his powers to make the world a better place. But then people took his powers for granted and blamed him for all their problems. Now Raven is just a masochist who hangs out with Batman. Cool. Meanwhile, the Assassin's Guild is not very happy that they got their fucking asses beat last game, so Venom and Robo-Kai go on a mission to kill Bedman. At first, Bedman seems to be invincible, but it turns out that whenever Bedman is awake, his brain just completely collapses under the weight of his own intelligence. So Robo-Kai blows himself up, and Venom launches a giant pool cue at the guy, forcing Bedman to wake up, leading to his death. With Bedman finally defeated, Venom decides to open a bakery. Meanwhile, Axel is still trying to decide if he should destroy the world and go back home to Megumi. So he goes around asking for opinions from Soul, Ino, and even Bedman at one point on what they would do if he decided to do that. To which they respond, please don't, so Axel decides to live forever alone. But he does come in clutch during the final Jacko and Justice fusion by stopping time, single-handedly allowing Soul to revive Arya. This brings us to Strive. I already went over most of it in the last video, but I did leave a few gaps, so let's fill those in now. Starting with Zato and Melia, who have disbanded the Assassin's Guild in favor of working for the Illyrian government. Melia just kinda stands there, and Zato works at a computer throughout the whole duration of the story. I don't know how. He's blind. There was also that one time where Happy Chaos launched every missile ever, so then Zato went out, destroyed like one of them, and then came right back. so he didn't really help at all. Anyways, no one cares about that. Remember when I said Arya was revived? Yeah, so while by all means she should have been revived, it turns out her consciousness still remained dormant within Jacko throughout the events of Strive. By the end of the story, Jacko reveals that Arya is never coming back. Well shit, all that work for nothing, I guess. Meanwhile, Axel discovers that he could just bring Megumi into his current timeline by simply swapping places with her. But the only problem is that if he swaps with her, he's not going to be able to see her, which kind of defeats the purpose of doing that. However, as Ino gets completely machine gunned by Soul Bad Guy, she decides to do the Megumi swap at the last second and finally, at long last, reunite Axel with his girlfriend. Let's fucking go. Let's go. Finally, some good fucking news. After the events of the story, Kai decides to step down from being the king of Illyria, welcoming a non-human leader to take his seat. Who is this new leader? I don't know, they haven't told us yet, but what matters is that Kai does this so that Gears could potentially gain the right to citizenship. This is essentially where the main story leaves off. But let's have a look at the Strive Arcade mode storylines. Most of these storylines are either just training arcs or Nagoriyuki's therapy sessions, but let's just focus on the two most interesting ones. First, we have Bridget. I can make a whole video on Bridget, honestly. Bridget was born as the younger of a set of twin boys. Unfortunately, she was also born to a village that fucking murders younger twin boys due to a superstition. So her parents decide to raise her as a girl to prevent her from being killed. Bridget, thinking that this superstition is bullshit, goes off on a journey to live as a boy and prove them bitches wrong. Fast forward a few years later, she succeeds. But she's also depressed, as she never really liked living as a boy to begin with. She goes to Kai and asks, "Hey Kai, when you called on the world to support Gear citizenship rights, weren't you afraid that people on Twitter would take your story and twist it all up, taking it out of context and trying to maliciously convince everyone that what you explicitly said you are is not actually what you are?" Brisket, if you wanted me to call you by she, her pronouns, you could have just said so. What the hell is that noise?
It took me 10 years to find the answers of me. I forgot about it in 2 seconds. I don't have anything that's really important to me. That's why everything is beautiful.
Can you tell who my favorite character is? Following the Strive story mode, Happy Chaos gets locked inside of a paradox alongside Ino. Any normal person would just be stuck there forever. But Happy Chaos knows a way out. How this works is...
Demi-humans transcend genetics, physics, and... But plainly, I do have a birthmark on my butt.
Okay, to keep things simple, Nagoriyuki transcends physics and time, allowing him to subconsciously access parallel universes, which grants Happy Chaos the ability to follow Nagoriyuki's memories into the main Guilty Gear timeline. This is why Happy Chaos comes back in the story's post-credit scene, even though he was seemingly eviscerated along with Ino. Happy Chaos also teases the possibility that he's gonna play the hero in whatever conflict happens next, and given that he has access to fucking parallel universes now, the future of Guilty Gear's storyline is nothing short of fucking terrifying. And that's about it for Guilty Gear's story. Now there are no more gaping plot holes or unexplained characters. On an unrelated note, here's a list of all the gaping plot holes and unexplained characters that I unfortunately couldn't fit into this video. Anyways, hopefully the next lore video isn't nearly as complicated as Guilty Gear. Oh, you son of a...